Hi, Year 10. So short video to take you through today's lesson. I thought it would help speed things up a little bit and help you get to the planning stages a bit quicker. So on the left-hand side of my screen, I've got the PowerPoint that you will all have. And then on the right, I've just got yesterday's PowerPoint with the poem there to make reference to it. So first slide's just asking you to think again about how the poem links to power and conflict. And obviously with Storm on the Island, you've got the two different interpretations that you would need to think about to do with power and to do with conflict. You've got the conflict of the Northern Irish Troubles. So the idea is that the storm, for this one interpretation, is a metaphor for the conflict that's happening in Northern Ireland at the time. The people on the island have got to live through this thing that is really dangerous, like a storm is, and they've got to live through this experience which can be quite unpredictable. If you think about the nature of conflict, not always certain when a bomb's going to go off or when there's going to be an increase in the fighting. So the idea of conflict, you would definitely link to that context of Northern Ireland. But also, you've got the power of nature, literally nature, like the power of an actual storm. So you've got the two different interpretations happening at the same time there. So that's your little knowledge recall task. And what you're trying to do in today's lesson is plan SEIZE paragraphs. Now, the learning outcomes got write 2 SEIZE paragraphs based on your learning. You'll be doing the actual writing of it next lesson, but you're going to attempt to plan 2 of them today. And if you don't have time, you're just going to plan 1 of them. Okay, and what you're going to see in today's lesson is just some different models of analysis. So you're going to see a grade 5 one and what that would look like. Then you're going to see a grade kind of 6, 7 borderline, and you're going to look at how that's improved from the grade 5. And then finally, you're going to look at a grade 8, 9. For some of you, I would certainly suggest just not looking at that grade 8, 9. If you think it's going to be enough for you to just look at the 6, 7 and see the improvement from the 5, then just do that. But that 8 and 9 is there for anybody that really wants to push themselves or that thinks they might be writing at that level. I'll cover that briefly, but I won't spend too much time on it. Okay, so we're just going to look at those examples now. And as always, with any kind of analysis in English, you're going to be thinking about these things here. How many quotes are there? What's the inference like? Are we using subject terminology? And have we linked it to the context? So let's look at this first example here. And in the middle, like with these diagrams, you've always got the quotes. And I'm just going to draw your attention to where the quotes come from. So we've got prepared and build and sit tight at opposite ends of the poem. And then we've also got the additional ones in there that run right the way through it. Now, why would that matter? Well, it's kind of showing that you can think about the poem as a whole. You're not just thinking about like one isolated quote from the top. You have thought about how the quotes link together across the whole poem, and there's quite a range of quotes there. So that's useful to think about. So in this example, this is our grade 5 example, you've got a statement which says, Heaney shows the power of nature and the effect that the weather has on the islanders. So it's a good statement. It links to the concept of power, so I know it's going to be relevant. And it's a bit more specific, and it says the impact that it has on the islanders. Okay, and then it's got a range of quotes that it might use. Then we go across to the inference. Well, this suggests that the islanders have a defensive position against the storm, whereas the storm is presented as powerful and attacking in a vicious and violent way, because the defensive position of the islanders is in these quotes in black. We are prepared. So the idea of preparation against something that's going to be attacking you, so you're being defensive in your preparation. Their defensive nature is actually in the way they build their houses. So they're so used to the stormy conditions that they almost live their lives in preparation for them. And we sit tight. So that's the defensive bit that's talking about there. Whereas the storm is presented as powerful and attacking. So the quotes in red are the quotes to do with the storm. The storm is blowing, it's blasting, it's pummeling, and it's spitting. Okay, so this inference is really good. It's drawn up a contrast between the islanders, who are really defensive, and the storm, which is powerful and attacking. Okay, so now we're zooming in. I'm going to bring in some subject terminology. The verbs prepared, build, and sit suggest that the islanders know the storm is approaching. These verbs are all defensive, whereas the blast of the storm that pummels them suggests that they're in a violent fight with the storm. So that's just developing on the inference by bringing in the subject terminology, talking about them as verbs, and reiterating that the verbs are quite defensive, contrasting to these more violent ones here. Okay? And then in the explore, it says, therefore, Heaney shows that the power of nature, Heaney shows the power of nature as nature is presented as unpredictable and dangerous, overwhelming the people on the island. So that explore links back to the question, links back to the power of nature. And hopefully what you're all thinking is, okay, it links to the question, but does it link to the context? And it doesn't. So we're going to look out for that as one of the improvements maybe to come in the next example. So really solid grade 5 paragraph there. Got some nice subject terminology in. It's got some quotes from across the poem, and it's making a really relevant point about the question. So that's a really solid example. And then if we look at this slightly improved example, which is grade 6 to 7, what I've done is I've just picked out in green the bits that are different to make it really obvious. And you'll see that a lot of it is the same. When we're trying to improve our paragraphs, try not to think about it as needing to rewrite the whole thing. It's usually just about adding in an additional phrase here, or perhaps slightly changing the way you've worded something. So the statement changes a little bit. It says, Heaney uses the extended metaphor of a battle to show the power of nature. So it just brings in the subject terminology into the statement. Okay, otherwise that statement is exactly the same. And you'll see that the quotes are the same as well, no change there. The inference is exactly the same, that the islanders are defensive and the storm is attacking. And then on the zoom, it begins the same way. The verbs prepared, build, and sit suggest that the islanders know the storm is approaching. The verbs are defensive, but now I think, there we go, I've missed something there, the plosive blast. So we've got another bit of improved terminology there. So the plosive is to do with the sound in that B, that hard B sound is a plosive sound. So they've popped in a little bit more terminology there. And then they've added another sentence at the end. This violent semantic field suggests that the storm is unrelenting and does not show any mercy. So how is that improved from a 5? Well, it's gone from just talking about verbs to talking about verbs and plosives and semantic field. So we've added in 2 different bits of subject terminology there. And then the explore is completely different. And this explore links to that Northern Irish context. So we'll just read that because that is different. As this poem was published in Northern Ireland in 1966, this violent assault on the islanders from the storm could be seen as a metaphor for the violent troubles in Northern Ireland, where Heaney was living. In this sense, the power of the storm that pummels and spits could be seen as the opposing sides fighting over Ireland. So this explorer is definitely better than the one in the 5 because it's linking into the context. And I think everybody, once you know what the context of a poem is, everyone is more than capable of explaining it in the explore part at the end. So that, I'd say, if you were just thinking about one thing to improve from the grade 5, that's definitely what I'd do. I'd think about making sure my explorer linked back to the context. Okay. Now, we're going to look briefly at the 8 and 9 one, but if you're thinking, that's not for me, I'm going to concentrate on this, then just skip forward the next minute or so, but I'll try to be quick. So in our grade 9 example, you'll notice that the only thing that's different is that there has been an extension. So you've got that really strong level 7 paragraph that has got different subject terminology. It's got verbs and plosives and semantic field. It's got nice inference. It's got a range of quotes, and it's got the context. But then how this person has managed to achieve this standard of grade 9 writing is that they have extended the idea, and we'll just read what they've said. They said, this idea is further reinforced through the military semantic field that's prevalent throughout the poem. As the sea is exploding, the wind strafes and the islanders are bombarded. Therefore, Heaney presents the conflict in Northern Ireland as a threatening storm that the islanders cannot fully prepare for. So what they've done is they've got their main quotes, which they talk about in the main part of the paragraph. But then often what an examiner will look for if they're kind of thinking, oh, I think I could be awarding top grades to this answer, is they're going to be looking at the range of quotations that you're able to draw into one point. So it doesn't it doesn't need to be another full paragraph. It's just an ability to take your statement and to think, okay, I've got my main quotes, but what other ones would work? And they've gone for exploding, and they've gone for strafes and bombarded, and they've actually also brought in a bit of a more nuanced point on the semantic field. So rather than just talking about it as violent, they've identified that it's not just violent, it's kind of military as well, which links into the context. So it's an additional look at other supporting quotes that have improved this answer. Okay, and that's just a little tick sheet which shows you what the different answers did, but that's what I've just talked you through there. Okay, now this is what you need to be planning today. So it says task, choose from the remaining key quotations, and the remaining key quotations are here, to write a SEIZE paragraph plans like the example. So you're going to be writing these little diagrams here where you've got the quote and then you've got your statement, inference, zoom, explore, and maybe extend. Thinking about using these quotes here or using a combination of those quotes. Now it does say here, aim to complete these 2 SEIZE sheets today. If one is going to take you the hour, then just do one. But if you can manage 2 in the time, then do the 2. And just be thinking when you're writing it, okay, what level am I going for? Am I going for a 5, in which case I'm going to be using this as my model? Am I going for a 6 or a 7, in which case I'm going to be using this one? Or am I going for an 8 or a 9? So just be mindful of those when you're writing. And then obviously you need to send a photo in of that. So hopefully that video was helpful. There is a copy of the poem at the end, just so you can see. You might want to use those key quotations, and if you're going for an 8 or a 9, you might want to find some other quotes to use as well. And you've just got a template there. So remember, do 1, and then if you can in the time, do a 2nd, but don't stress yourself out and spend hours writing 2. Just do what you can in the time. Okay, I hope that was helpful. Year 10, any questions, just put them in show my homework as usual. All right, bye-bye.